Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony Hughes from Troop 60B in New Delhi, India.
Namaste. I'm Elena Hughes from Troop 60G in New Delhi. We're glad you could join us today for this important guide to good and effective communication skills.
That's right, we're here to give you a bad example of good communication.
Wait, what do you mean? Why would we give them a bad example?
For two reasons. First, sometimes you learn more from a bad example than you do from a good example. Second, we're doing the best we can with the tools we have to communicate across the entirety of the Far East Council. That means in this video, we can only cover about half of what it means to be a good communicator.
You make a good point. Too many people confuse good communication with good presenting and forget that communication is actually a two-way street that involves more listening and thinking than it does actually talking or showing visual aids.
Exactly. Because we're here and now, but our audience members are there and then, it's hard to engage with their partners who are yonder and when? I don't know. Time zones are hard.
That said, we'll do our best to review the tools of effective communication, both one-on-one and in a group, in a clear and helpful manner. Along the way, we'll encourage you, our audience, to take notes and try some challenges with your units back at home.
You'll see that communication isn't just as simple as using mouth words. It takes planning, empathy, and practice to effectively transmit ideas and get them to stick with others.
First, we'll cover one-on-one communication and then kick it up a notch to delve into group and electronic communications.
When you leave today, you should be able to know the keys to sending and receiving messages effectively, understand the importance of one-on-one communication, recognize the nonverbal tools of communication and explain the basics of public speaking skills, understand the different dynamics of small, large, and digital groups, visualize how communication impacts member retention, and finally, create a smart vision for communication in your unit.
Wow, that's a lot to cover. Normally, we'd go through these objectives with games, role play, but video? Whew. Oh, luckily, I know that our audience are all airmen, which means that they've mastered many of the scouting skills and several of today's topics already. I bet we can breeze through the basics and focus on the tougher skills.
I think you're right. So, basics. Hack the clock. As you've all likely heard before, Aristotle was a noted philosopher in ancient Greece. He shaped much of Western thought and mapped out the central pillars of communication over 2,000 years ago. Those pillars? Sender, message, and receiver. For our purposes today, the sender basically means you and me. The message is the information that passes, and the receiver is our audience. But be careful. The message you intend to receive and the one that the receiver gets are not always the same thing. If you see from your audience's feedback that they're not getting the message you intended, it might be time to change up your approach and send your message via other tools like demonstrations, drawings, or handouts.
The other challenge we face to communication is noise. Communication isn't always straightforward, as Aristotle said. It's rarely a blank room with just one speaker and one receiver. Noise interferes with our communications, whether it's background noise or people jumping in from outside the conversation that distract the receiver from the message.
If we can't remove the noise in our current environment, then we can try other communication methods. But sometimes we just need to move to a quieter place or pick up the conversation another time.
It's also easy to forget sometimes that we've been in scouting for a while. Some of the terms we might use might be perfectly normal for us, but can be confusing to our classmates, relatives, or a new scout. For someone new to this topic, you need to take things slow and check to make sure that they understand the discussion by having them explain things in their own words or demonstrate the skill that you just demoed.
While for more experienced audiences, you might want to see what they already know before you accidentally tell a doctor how to take care of something simple like a blister. Really, this comes down to getting to know your audience, usually through asking questions.
Speaking of getting to know your audience, let's dive into that one-on-one communication part.
Now hold on. Why one-on-one communication? Isn't that a basic skill these folks have already mastered? They're airmen. They're leaders in their units, in charge of 5, dozen, maybe even 50 scouts.
True, But if you don't understand the basics, the one on one aspect of why we communicate, we will find it much harder to read our entire audience and bring individuals into our groups. Mastering one on one communication can be uncomfortable. It's up close. There's a lot of nonverbal cues, like how you're picking your nails right now.
Oops.
When a one person audience doesn't look at you, it feels like they're not listening. But when they ask follow up questions, you know that you're building a relationship with a team member you can trust in the future.
So, what exactly does that mean to build trust in a working relationship?
Well, scouts aren't ants. They don't do what you said just because you're the one in charge. Leadership is built on common respect and trust between scouts and airmen, so you need to get to know them. The youngest member to the oldest member need to know that you are a trustworthy member of the team who's looking out for the group and helping us to meet our common goals. You can't do that if all you ever talk about is pitch that tent and don't burn my eggs.
Okay, so you're saying that we need to find the person behind the crunchy eggs. See what their hobbies are. Find out if they're better at making a crispy BLT rather than a warm, fluffy omelet.
Right. Talk more about school life, sports, favorite movies. For our council, it's likely you could also talk about other places they've lived, languages they speak, and favorite foods that are hard to get from the current country that you're living in. Maybe, if you're lucky, they'll bring some new recipes to those campouts so you don't have to worry about crunchy eggs.
That would be nice. So, you've talked about the talking to people side of communication. What about the nonverbal side of communication? That's equally as important. For example, if I show you this slide here and talk to you for the next 10 minutes, I'm pretty sure your eyes will start rolling out of your head.
Yes, absolutely. We're all pretty familiar with bad examples of nonverbal communication that show how someone likely isn't listening, but there are just as many positive methods of nonverbal communication to drive the conversation and own the stage.
Right. Besides eye contact, our body language can speak volumes. Hand moving adds energy and helps emphasize your point, as does a good foot stomp or table slap that says, "This is on the test." It's not just moving parts of your body, but also moving your whole body. Do your best to move around the room or the stage. When someone has a question, walk up next to them so that they can ask it. At a campfire, don't just shift your eyes to different parts of the audience. Actually move around the fire and speak to the whole camp.
In all aspects, follow the scout law to be courteous. Simple things like showing up on time, thinking about what you're going to say before you raise your hand, and keeping your comments short so that other people have a chance to participate as well will all go a long way in showing your engagement in the communication.
Probably the most important thing to work on is to exercise active listening skills. There's an old saying that says we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. Active listening means internalizing the communications. Thinking, how does this apply to me? What would happen if I followed that instruction? Or even just taking notes to review later. Active listening is the biggest tool we have to engage ourselves in communication.
Knowing these key nonverbal skills help us assess if someone is receiving the message that we are sending. One message we want to encourage as lodge leadership is membership retention. By establishing personal relationships through engagement in one-on-one conversations, we help new members feel they are individually important and an equally valued member of the Brotherhood.
Notice this is one of those slides where you should take notes. This is your challenge. Invite a new member. If your unit doesn't have new ordeal members, then invite somebody who's new to scouting to join in. They might join the OA further down the line. Follow up with this person and let them know you care.
That was a lot for just one-on-one communication. How much longer will it take to cover group communication?
Not as long as you might think. Everyone, take a quick breath, wiggle your fingers and toes, and rest assured, the foundation we built for one-on-one communication supports the group discussion.
Okay, let's keep going. We all encounter plenty of audiences when we communicate. For this lesson, we're looking at a smaller selection: airmen, families, and scouting units. Our youngest airmen are often dependent on their family or other adults for transportation to and from the Order of the Arrow activities. Older airmen often have responsibilities in the unit. It is important to remember that your communication must consider both airmen and their family and unit.
As we said before, those of you here today know the importance of being able to speak in front of groups already. You probably also know that in order to speak in front of these groups, you need to be prepared ahead of time, usually with an outline or plan of your main points.
The common temptation is to write a script, but scripts can feel stiff and unnatural. It'll take practice to strike a balance between preparing too much and preparing too little. The key is to remain flexible and don't get upset when things change or don't go completely according to plan. There's a lot of details to cover this section, and we're going to go fast, but don't worry, the handouts referenced on the slides ahead will cover a majority of your notes that you'll need to handling all of these situations.
In scouting, communicating with small groups is one of the most common forms of communication that we face. Here, we consider small groups to be anything with 2 to 16 members. This means your PLC, your patrol meetings, and your lodge executive committees could all be considered small groups.
Small group communications are necessary for success, not only in scouting, but also in school and later at work. While we might not always like group projects, a small group gives us space for a relaxed environment and allows you to interact personally with each member. Small groups are usually our preferred setting for audience engagement and knowledge retention.
Large groups might feel less common, but imagine being up on stage in front of your whole school. Or maybe you've done a skit at summer camp with a few hundred people. It's a bit different than sitting around a table with a group of 16, right?
For this lesson, a large group is any group larger than 30 people. Yes, that's right, math whizzes. We look at a group of 16 to 30 to be a medium size, but we won't go into the details of that here. The good news is that many of you probably have regular experience with groups over 30, whether it's in your troop, your classroom, or maybe even your birthday party.
That's a good point. Think about those environments. You might know every person in that room. You might call most of them friends. But even in a class or troop meeting, you're not likely going to be able to speak to all of them during a single session.
Yeah, and try to engage just one often means the rest of the room starts getting out of control.
That's true. And that's why we usually see large group communication involving a single person at a time lecturing an audience. Sometimes we get round robins or panel discussion, but all of these involve much less interaction than what we see with small groups or one-on-one communication. Even so, it's possible to keep these large groups engaged. Think about when your teacher asks for a show of hands in class. Or maybe you've been in a place where you can answer questions on a screen or type comments during a discussion. These type of things can help your audience keep engaged, even when you know you can't connect to each person individually.
Another tool available is to break people into those smaller groups. We said before that a large group are basically troop size and small groups are patrol sized. That increased interaction at the patrol level is exactly why most troops split into patrols or activity groups right after the flags and opening announcements.
So let's move on to content creation. The Ready checklist will help you in preparing content for the groups that you'll need to address. Ready stands for rewarding, engaging, attractive, dynamic, and you.
Communication should be rewarding, providing a reason for the receiver to respond. This could be encouraging the early bird registration for an event or inviting scouts and scouters to join the Scouting's National Honor Society.
Communication should be engaging and provide a call to action. Simply put, a call to action is any directive or instruction for the receiver to do. This might be paying dues, recruiting airmen for a ceremony team, or visiting a lodge's Facebook page. The call to action is reaching out and engaging.
Communication should be attractive, providing a professional looking publication. The Order of the Arrow is volunteer led, but lodges have a wide array of resources at their disposal to produce attractive, quality communication pieces.
Dynamic communication is personalized and relevant. If you can change email headers to reflect each receiver's names, use this chance to connect with your audience. Additionally, consider giving your communications a holiday or a seasonal flair.
Communication should reflect your interest or passions in the subject. Your audience wants to see the human beings sending the message and not feel like it all came from an AI.
All right, so let's use these tips. A lot of content creation happens through digital means, especially here in the Far East Council, where we are spread far and wide. There are three main types of digital communications: emails, mass text, and websites like social media. The size of your audience and the intended message will help you determine which of these methods is best to use. Mass text can be effective to send short, brief messages to receivers, and can be especially effective in reminding airmen of upcoming meetings, registration deadlines, and updates during an event. Email is a cheap and effective way to broadcast your message to a large audience, especially if you need to share forms or sign-up links. And then websites like social media are your largest audiences, providing a great, long-lasting repository for your events, documents, and media.
Those are all great ways of communicating, but each of them are only as good as the consistency at which they are updated and the care that goes into crafting each message for the target audience.
True. As Arrowmen, we have a responsibility to share the mission and the purpose of the Order of the Arrow with its members and our communities. Providing clear, consistent messaging, whether in person or electronically, helps to bridge the members of our lodge together with the greater OA and scouting movement, despite the size and distances of our council.
That's true. And that leaves us with one final challenge to take note of. A challenge to share the message of the OA right where you are. How can you share the mission and the purpose of the OA with your unit or community? How can you and your local airmen use better communication to share the cheerful service message where you are?
You can use handout number 5 to answer this challenge. It and all the other handouts referenced in these slides are available from the Lodge. Use the SMART model to help you outline your vision, goals, and plan for making it a reality. Then remember to share it with your unit so you can put it into action.
We really appreciate you being part of the Lodge Leadership Development with us today. Hopefully you learned something useful and maybe even laughed a little bit along the way. And please remember that this was a bad example of communication. Whenever possible, make sure you're present with your audience so that you can best engage all the tools and skills that we talked about here today.
From Delhi, Dhanyavad.